Rebel soul child, got a fist ball, I'm a respawn of ancestors, and I'm blessed, huh?
What's going on? Welcome back to On The Cage MMA. My name is Brandon Eldridge, and today we're going to be running through my UFC London Fight Night predictions. Okay, so the first fight is going to be Lerone Murphy versus Josh Culibao. This is going to be a featherweight bout, so let's have a breakdown of both the fighters, and we're going to start with Culibao. Culibao has been in the UFC since 2020, and he took his first loss on his UFC debut. His second fight in the UFC was also a split decision draw, and he's currently on a 3-fight win streak since 2021. And to be honest, 3 wins, a draw and a loss within the UFC within a 2-year period, still he's active regardless of whether he's winning or losing, which is always a good sign. Culibao has won 3 belts with 3 other divisions, one being with the Hex Championship, the second one being with Diamondback FC, and he also won a featherweight belt with Super Fight MMA. Now, I of course know that it's not on the same level as the UFC, but it's still impressive. He has a current MMA record of 11 wins, 1 loss, 1 draw. Out of the 11 wins, 6 of them have been by decision, which means you know he can fight and he's got a gas tank on him, right? He currently fights out of Igor MMA and is a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He is also 5'10", which means he is quite a long and slim featherweight. Right, now let's move on to Lerone Murphy, who's currently a British featherweight fighter. He currently fights out of Manchester Top Team and he stands at 5'9", and he is only a blue belt in Jiu-Jitsu, meaning he mainly only knows defensive work. He, however, has a record of 12 wins with 1 draw. That draw also came on his first debut fight for the UFC. In his second UFC fight, he also got Performance of the Night. He also won the FCC featherweight belt. So he's had 5 fights in the UFC with 4 wins and 1 loss, which is pretty good. What's also quite exciting as well is that he's also called out Nathaniel Wood, who is also fighting above him on this UFC London card. So if the UFC London ever wanted to make a good matchup between 2 British fighters in the UFC, which I'm not even sure has been done, that would be the first place that I would look to. So pretty much the same as his opponent. Out of his 12 wins, 5 of them have been by decision. So what do I think is going to happen in this particular fight? Without trying to sound too biased, I honestly think Lerone Murphy is going to win this. I don't think it's going to be like a domination. I think it's going to be very, very close. This prediction is, of course, if he keeps it on the feet, because as we know, he is only a blue belt, which means it's only defensive positions that he knows. So if his opponent can get him to the floor and keep him there, it might be a whole different fight, but currently, I think Lerone Murphy's going to win. Okay, so next we have Jay Herbert versus Faraz Ziam, who's a French-born fighter. Ziam has currently had 5 bouts inside of the UFC, and out of the 5 bouts, he's won 3 and lost 2. Now, the only thing that's getting me with this one is he has only won by decision since being in the UFC. Now, it's not a bad way to win. It's not. It could have been, every single fight could have been a war. However, it's not as exciting. But saying that, you know, he is only 26 years old, so he's the same age as me. He's 6'1". He's still got a good 10 years left, so it's not like he's untalented, and he has won belts before. So he's had 17 professional MMA fights, with 13 being wins and 4 being losses. So out of the 4 wins that he's had, 3 have been by submission, so clearly he has a weak point in his game, which is not great. I mean, I found this out in 10 minutes of looking the guy up. Do you know what I mean? So if you've got a whole team dedicated to find that out, if I was Jay Herbert, I certainly would be taking this to the floor and trying to maybe get a rear naked choke or a guillotine on this guy. In fact, I can actually see here that 3 of those losses that were submission were all rear naked choke. So he clearly gives up his back a lot, which is something to look out for. Now let's go to Jay Herbert. I'll be deadly honest with you, I'm not the biggest fan of him. I think he is an okay fighter, maybe even average fighter. I'm not saying I would beat him in a fight or anything, I'm just saying compared to the other British talent we got, you know, he really doesn't stand out as much. You know, he's had 6 fights in the UFC, he's lost 3, won 2, drew 1. That's very average. You know, normally after 2 losses in a row, the UFC normally cut you. So it's quite lucky that it has been cut. I know the UFC are trying to get together lots of British talent, so when they do the UFC London cards, they get to stack it up. Also with that, you know, I think, how old is he? 35 years old? You know, that's pretty old considering that he's probably got 5 years left. And that's if you're at an elite level of fighting, which I truly just don't think that he is. Let's not take away what he has also achieved in his career. You know, he's been doing this for a very long time. He's a veteran of the game. He is a brown belt in Jiu-Jitsu, which is really going to help him, knowing that his opponent, you know, gives his back up a lot. Both fighters do stand at 6'1". How do I see this going? Honestly, I think that Jay Herbert's going to win. Now, I know this is the 2nd British fighter in a row. The French fighter, he keeps giving his back up. There's 3 fights in history, and they've been over the case of a couple of years. It's not like it's all been like in the last couple of years, like 2 years, so he hasn't learned his lesson. This French guy has been doing it for a long time. So over the space of a career spanning maybe 6 years, he's given up his back 3-4 different times. Lost the exact same way every single time apart from once. I think Herbert could take it to the floor, choke him out, rear naked choke, because it seems to be this guy's weakness. So I'm going to give the fight to Jay Herbert. Right, so next we have Paul Craig versus Andre Muniz. Now this one is a little bit more interesting. This is going to be fought at middleweight Both fighters are normally light heavyweight, so they both had to cut a lot of weight off to make it to this weight. Let's start this off by talking about Andre Muniz. He's been fighting since 2009. He has a current record of 23 wins and 5 losses. This guy is a very talented fighter and won both his bouts in Dana White's contender seasons. Not only that, he's only lost one since being with the UFC. So he's consistently fighting and is an active fighter, which is always good. He has also beaten names like Ronaldo Souza and Uriah Hall, who by the way are not easy opponents to beat. What makes this more interesting is both fighters on this fight are black belts in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Both of their wins mainly come from submissions, and both fighters are currently coming off a loss. Okay, so now let's talk about Paul Craig. The thing I find about Paul Craig is when it's coming to the big fights, the big names, the people he needs to beat to get into the top 5, he seems to struggle with that. I don't know if it's the pressure or not. The last fight against Johnny Walker really was not him showing. I don't know what was wrong. I don't know if mentally he was all in that fight, if he even wanted to fight. But when I saw him fight Krylov, that was probably some of his best stuff that he's done. It feels like he's scared to sometimes take the hit and he tries to take it straight to the ground, but I feel like sometimes he concentrates too much on taking it to the ground. Because I've seen him stand and bang in so many fights, and he can take a hit and he can give a hit. He's a big fucking Scottish dude. That being said, he is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's also 6'4", which is going to be massive considering this bout is going to be at middleweight. So he's had 16 professional MMA bout wins and 13 of them have been as submission wins. He does, however, have home crowd advantage, which, believe me, actually makes a difference. He does pretty well in London when he does fight there. I think he's only ever lost once whilst being in London. You know, with all that said and the fact that this is going to be a middleweight bout, I think Andre Muniz is going to win this fight. He's going to go to the floor, and I think he's going to choke out Paul Craig. Right, so next we have Nathaniel Wood versus Andre Fili, and let's start with Fili. Let's delve into his career a little bit. So he has a current pro MMA career of 22 wins and 9 losses. He's been fighting with the UFC since 2013, and he's currently 33 years old. He also stands at 5'10", which is pretty tall, considering he's also got a 74-inch reach, which is definitely higher and longer than Nathaniel Wood's. He also fights out of the famous Team Alpha Male. So his UFC career has been rocky, to say the least. He tends to have a consistency of a win, a loss, a win, a loss. There has been 2 occasions where he's had 2 wins in a row and then he's lost again, but that is the fight game. That is what's going to happen. And to be fair to the guy, he has fought people like Yair Rodriguez, Max Holloway, Michael Johnson, so it's not like he's fighting nobodies. He's fighting these top level guys. He did also get to the championship final of the Rebel Fighter Championship. He did, however, take his first loss in that championship. What I do find impressive though is he's had 32 MMA fights professionally. 19 of them, win or loss, have been in UFC, so it's the highest caliber of fighters. So you can't really knock him down for that. Okay, now let's move on to Nathaniel Wood, who is currently fighting out a Great Britain top team. So his MMA record is 19 wins with 5 losses. He has won the Cage Warriors Bantamweight Championship belt and defended it. And with 8 current fights in the UFC, he's won 6 and lost 2 of them. He's also coming off a 2-fight win streak, which is really good for momentum, and he is very, very active as a fighter. He also trains under Brad One Punch Pickett. If you don't know who that is, go fucking look it up. I've been watching Nathaniel Wood's career for the last couple of years. I've only ever seen him do better. So in this fight, I honestly think Nathaniel Wood is going to get the win. Okay, so next we have Molly McCann versus Stoliarenko. This one, again, is interesting. Let's start off by talking about Stoliarenko. She's currently a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is good for her because we do know that Molly McCann does struggle if the fight goes to the floor. That's just a fact, don't hate me. She currently has a professional MMA record of 10 wins, 7 losses and 2 draws. So she had 5 fights in the UFC, with 4 of them being losses. I'm quite surprised that she's been kept on at the company, if I'm honest. But sometimes I think they just need fighters to fill in for bigger names. She has also won the Invicta Bantamweight Championship belt, which is pretty impressive. And she currently fights out of the Roger Gracie Academy. So you know she's definitely going to take this fight to the floor. She's also coming off a loss, which does affect people mentally. Now let's move on to Molly McCann. She has a professional MMA record with 13 wins and 5 losses. Molly is also coming off of a loss when she got Kimura'd by her last opponent. The thing is, you can never count Molly out because when she is on the feet, she's more than likely going to bang you out. Now I know I keep talking about home advantage, but it really does have an impact on your mentality. Imagine you're around 2 and you're knackered and you can't fight no more and you have 20,000 people screaming your name. It's going to fucking egg you on. It's really going to make you change your game up. And every time she fights in London, she does very well. McCann is also a purple belt in Jiu-Jitsu. Now, I've not seen too much of her Jiu-Jitsu game in the fights because she normally wins by knocking people out, but we'll have to wait and see for the fight to happen. And she's currently fighting out of Next Generation Gym. So on the occasion of this fight, I think McCann's going to beat Stoliarenko and I think she's going to knock her out. Right, now let's talk about Aspinall versus Deborah. We'll start with Deborah. Now this guy is not one to be messed around with. He has a current MMA record of 24 wins and 7 losses. He's also beaten very big names. He's beaten people like Walt Harris, Ben Rothwell, Sergey Spivak. You know, these are big names to beat. He did take a loss against Alexander Volkov, who Tom Aspinall beat. But he's got a pretty good resume when it comes to taking down big guys. He's also coming off a 2-fight win streak. One of the fights was 2022, one 2023, so he is an active fighter. Him, like many other fighters on this card, is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which does honestly matter. And he currently fights out of the Syndicate MMA team. He stands at 6'3" and he has a 78-inch reach. So out of his 31 professional matches, 17 have been with the UFC. So regardless of win or losing, that's high-level athletes. That's the best you can be fighting. So it doesn't really matter if he's losing. Look at the people that he's losing to. You need to take that into consideration as well. The only thing slightly letting him down at the minute is his last 2 wins have been decision, and his loss was also decision, meaning his last 3 fights have all been decision. So he's looking to go to the distance. Okay, so let's talk about Tom Aspinall now. In his last fight, he is coming off a loss. It was an unfortunate loss. 15 seconds or around 15 to the first minute of the first round. He checked a leg kick and threw a leg kick, broke his leg. So that's the only reason he lost that fight. I don't know what would have happened if it went the distance. He was fighting Curtis Blades, who was an extremely well-rounded fighter that could have gone anywhere. However, I did predict at the time that he was going to win by knockout. Before that, Aspinall had not lost since 2016, and he tends to knock his opponents out very quickly. He has a current MMA record professionally of 12 wins and 3 losses. Now, out of those 12 wins, out of all of his fights, only 2 of those fights have gone past the first round. 2 fights past the first round. Now that does beg the question, how good is his stamina? Because he's never had to go 3 rounds. And especially if his opponent is used to going to the decision, this is going to be a very interesting fight for Aspinall if he doesn't get the early knockout. Like his opponent, Aspinall is also a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So he is 6'5", so he's 2 inches taller than his opponent, but they both had the exact same 78-inch reach. Both fighters have also had over 3 performances of the night bonuses whilst being with the UFC, which is pretty impressive. However, Tybura is 37, which means he's very close to retirement. Aspinall was still pretty much in his prime. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm just going to be honest. I think Aspinall is going to destroy him. I really do. I think this is going to be a first round knockout from Aspinall. I think he's been fucking waiting for this comeback fight. And the thing is, Aspinall is currently ranked 5th. Tybura is currently ranked number 10. So once Aspinall gets this win, which I do believe he will get the win, he'll then fight another big name like he did with Curtis Blades. After that win, he could even challenge John Jones to a belt. Like, honestly, he could. And I fucking hope, I really hope the UFC put that belt in London. Just give us one championship fight in London. I didn't get to go to Leon Edwards one. I'm still mad about it. I'm mad about it. I didn't get the tickets. They were like $4 grand for like 1 ticket. So fuck the UFC, but also I love the UFC. Again, this is just my opinion, but this is where I think the UFC fight night is going to go. And don't forget that on my last UFC London prediction, every single fight I got was correct. So technically I've got a 100% record. I'm going to say it. Okay, that was it. That was my UFC London fight card prediction. If you agree or disagree with any of the fights I've done, leave a comment below, like the video, don't forget to subscribe. I'm also doing another channel, which I'll let you know about very, very soon. I'm also doing journalist work with VMTV, so a shout out to them. And if you haven't read my article, go read it. Be a nice person. But until then, I'll see you on the next one.
They are not him, tell him fess up. I get check stub, hella carefree, nothing scares me, hella reckless. Yeah, I got next up, right? No, we not the same. Cause see, when I look in your